Hello everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we have 3 spine-chilling stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about fear. Ever felt like you were being watched? Or maybe saw something you couldn't explain? First, 2 friends at a quiet beach are stalked by something that's not human. Then, a luxurious boat ride turns into a nightmare when they realize they're not alone at all. Finally, a family's peaceful hotel stay takes a terrifying turn when a strange knock on the door reveals a sinister presence. Have you ever had an encounter like this? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned, because you won't believe what happens next. It was a Friday night in Cedar Ridge, Utah. Amber had agreed to join me and my best friend Max at Lakeview Beach. The weather was perfect, and we were excited. Max quickly disappeared with Amber's friend Jade, leaving Amber and me alone. The beach was eerily quiet, the only sound being the crashing waves. As we walked along the shore, I felt a growing sense of unease. Amber, as usual, seemed calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. The quietness around us was unsettling. I looked at her, but her gaze was focused on something in the distance, her expression unreadable. Suddenly, Amber pointed toward the water. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I squinted into the distance. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw Ida, a tall figure standing motionless in the water. It didn't look like a person. It was too still, too unnatural. I stepped closer, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But as I moved, the figure shifted. My heart raced, the breath caught in my chest. "It's a person," I whispered, but something about it didn't feel right. My gut twisted with unease. Amber grabbed my arm. "Let's go." We quickly turned and started walking back. The air was heavy now, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was following us. I just knew it. We hurried back to the car, but the strange feeling didn't leave. The air around us felt thick with dread. As we reached the vehicle, Max and Jade still weren't back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Max. A series of frantic texts. I quickly opened them. "Dude, there's someone out there, watching us. Something's wrong, get to the car now." I glanced at Amber, my heart pounding. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but the panic in Max's messages was unmistakable. "We need to go," I said urgently. Amber's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. As we waited, the silence between us was suffocating. And then, Max called. "Get in the car," he gasped. "We're being followed." I felt a chill run down my spine. The dread was real now, and something told me we weren't just imagining it. Max's voice came through the phone, strained and breathless. "It's getting closer, man. I don't know what it is, but it's coming after us." I could hear the panic in his words. My mind raced as I looked around, but all I saw was the thick, oppressive darkness of the night. "Max, where are you?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "We're almost there. Just stay put," he replied, his voice quivering. I felt Amber squeeze my hand, her fear mirroring mine. The seconds felt like hours. I glanced down at the empty stretch of sand ahead, waiting for Max and Jade to appear. My heart was hammering in my chest. And then I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, and coming from behind us. I spun around, but there was nothing. Only the sound of my breath and the crashing waves. "We're not alone," I whispered, barely able to breathe. Max's voice was frantic as he spoke. "We're right behind you, just stay close." "Something's chasing us, Trey." My heart raced as I looked into the dark void of the beach, still hearing only the sound of the waves. The footsteps were gone, but the fear remained. Amber's grip tightened around my arm. I could feel her trembling. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness. Max and Jade appeared in the distance, running toward the car, their faces pale and wide-eyed. "We need to leave." "Now," Max said, his voice shaking. He and Jade jumped into the car, and Max slammed the door behind him. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's something out there," Max said. "We thought it was just a person, but no, it's not. It's something else. Something wrong." We all sat there, frozen as the feeling of dread settled in, and the silence that followed felt deafening. The tension in the air was unbearable as we sat in the car, all of us too scared to speak. Max and Jade were still catching their breath, looking out the windows nervously. I couldn't stop thinking about the figure in the water, the strange feeling that we weren't alone. Amber spoke, her voice trembling. "Do you think it's still out there?" "I don't know," I said, my voice tight. "But I don't want to find out." Max nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tight. "We need to go. Now." He started the car and sped off, the headlights slicing through the darkness. We drove in silence, the only sound the engine's roar and the crunch of gravel under the tires. Every shadow, every movement, made my heart race. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the main road. But I knew one thing for sure: we weren't alone anymore. Something had followed us. The drive felt endless. We didn't talk, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. Max kept glancing in the rearview mirror, as if expecting something to appear. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. As we neared the edge of town, I let out a sigh of relief. We were almost home, but that's when it happened. Max slammed on the brakes. There, standing in the middle of the road, was the figure. Tall, pale, and distorted. It didn't move, just stared at us, with an unnatural stillness. I froze, my blood running cold. "What the hell is that?" Amber whispered. Max didn't wait for an answer. He floored the gas pedal, swerving around the figure. We sped away, but I knew whatever it was still out there, following us. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away from Lakeview Beach. The headlights flickered, casting strange shadows along the empty road. Max's hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. I kept checking the rearview mirror, hoping to see nothing, but all I saw was darkness. Amber's voice broke the silence. "Do you think we lost it?" I shook my head, still unable to shake the image of that figure. "I don't know. I don't think so." Max's phone buzzed. He checked it, his face going pale. It was a message from Jade. It followed us. It's still watching. Max threw the phone onto the dashboard, his eyes wide with terror. We were all silent, the weight of the fear pressing down on us. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, but no matter how far we drove, I knew one thing for certain: whatever we encountered at the beach wasn't done with us. We kept driving, but it felt like the distance was never enough. Max glanced at the road signs, but everything seemed too familiar. I kept hearing faint noises outside scratching, like something was trying to get in. Amber sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, her grip shaking. Then, without warning, Max swerved sharply. I turned, my heart stopping. The figure was standing in the middle of the road again, tall, distorted, and unnatural. It was waiting for us, unblinking. Max slammed on the brakes, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring, its presence suffocating. We were trapped. "Max, go!" I shouted. Max floored the gas pedal again, swerving past the figure. But I felt a coldness spread through the car as we sped away. I looked back one last time. The figure was still there, watching us. And I knew we weren't getting away. It was one of those perfect afternoons in Clearwater. Florida warm, sunny, and the kind of day that begged for a trip to the beach. Kara, my 20-year-old sister, decided to go out and catch the sunset by the water. I, being the older sibling at 18, always felt it was my responsibility to keep an eye on her. We weren't far from our house, but something about the beach at night always unnerved me. "Just stay close, okay?" I reminded her as she headed toward the water. She rolled her eyes and waved me off, running straight for the waves. I stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the distance, a sense of unease creeping over me. It wasn't the beach itself, but the isolation, the emptiness of it all. I turned my attention to the small boat docked not far from the shore, the type that always seemed to belong to someone who wanted to avoid the crowds. The sight made my stomach churn. For some reason, I couldn't look away from it. My mind started to wander as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, creeping shadows across the sand. I glanced back at Kara, still wading through the water, her laughter echoing back toward me. I was about to call out to her when I noticed something. A boat. A luxurious, well-maintained boat, too far from the dock. It had just appeared. The stillness of the water, the absence of a person on board, made me uneasy. Why hadn't I noticed it before? Instinctively, I started walking toward Kara. She was too far from the shore now, the waves beginning to crash around her. The wind picked up, howling across the beach as if it knew something I didn't. I quickened my pace, but my eyes kept flicking back to the boat. It felt like I was being watched. I reached Kara, about to tell her to come back to the shore when I heard a soft laugh. Not from Kara, not from anyone I recognized. It came from the boat. A low, eerie sound, almost mocking, drifting over the water. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a human laugh, it was something darker, like a warning. "Kara," I whispered, grabbing her arm. "We need to go. Now." I yanked Kara toward the shore, the water growing rougher with every passing second. My heart pounded as I pulled her away from the waves, but my eyes kept darting back to the boat. It had drifted closer. I hadn't seen anyone on board before, but now I could make out two shadowy figures standing at the bow. Their faces were obscured, but the way they stood, motionless, sent a cold shiver up my spine. "What's wrong?" Kara asked, looking back at me, confused by my frantic movements. "Keep moving," I snapped, not wanting to scare her but needing her to hurry. The air around us felt thick with unease, as if the very beach itself was holding its breath. We reached the sand, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. I glanced back. The boat was too close now. It shouldn't have been. We were on the far end of the beach, isolated, and no one should have been that close without us noticing. Suddenly, I heard it again, the laugh. But this time, it wasn't soft. It was louder, sharper, echoing across the water. The figures on the boat seemed to move, but they didn't walk. It was more like they were gliding, unnaturally, as if the sea itself was carrying them toward us. My stomach dropped, and I grabbed Kara's hand. "We need to get out of here," I said, voice trembling. "Now." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned, practically dragging her along the beach, back toward the street. The wind howled, almost like it was warning us to leave, but it was already too late. The boat was coming for us, and there was no way out. We kept running, my heart hammering in my chest as the sound of footsteps in the sand grew closer. Kara stumbled beside me, trying to keep up as I pulled her along the beach. I dared not look behind me, but the feeling of being pursued was overwhelming. It was as if the very darkness itself was chasing us, tightening its grip. The boat was close now, its engine roaring to life, cutting through the silence of the night. I heard the faint sound of the figures, laughing again, louder this time. It was a low, guttural sound, like something deep in the throat, twisted and wrong. "Ethan, what's happening?" Kara gasped, her voice breaking. "We have to make it to the road," I shouted, not daring to explain. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't normal. We couldn't stop running. The shore was empty now. We were alone, exposed, with nowhere to hide. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps splashing in the water, fast, almost inhuman. They were closing in. I turned for a brief moment to look over my shoulder, but there was nothing there. Only the dark shape of the boat moving swiftly toward us. And then I saw it, the figures on the boat, gliding effortlessly across the surface of the water, their bodies elongated and unnatural, glowing faintly in the darkness. "Run, Kara, run!" I screamed. "We need to get out of here," I said, voice trembling. "Now." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned, practically dragging her along the beach, back toward the street. The wind howled, almost like it was warning us to leave. But it was already too late. The boat was coming for us, and there was no way out. We kept running, my heart hammering in my chest as the sound of footsteps in the sand grew closer. Kara stumbled beside me, trying to keep up as I pulled her along the beach. I dared not look behind me, but the feeling of being pursued was overwhelming. It was as if the very darkness itself was chasing us, tightening its grip. The boat was close now, its engine roaring to life, cutting through the silence of the night. I heard the faint sound of the figures laughing again, louder this time. It was a low, guttural sound, like something deep in the throat, twisted and wrong. "Ethan, what's happening?" Kara gasped, her voice breaking. "We have to make it to the road," I shouted, not daring to explain. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't normal. We couldn't stop running. The shore was empty now. We were alone, exposed, with nowhere to hide. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps splashing in the water. Fast, almost inhuman. They were closing in. I turned for a brief moment to look over my shoulder, but there was nothing there. Only the dark shape of the boat, moving swiftly toward us. And then I saw the figures on the boat, gliding effortlessly across the surface of the water, their bodies elongated and unnatural, glowing faintly in the darkness. "Run, Kara, run!" I screamed. It was supposed to be the perfect vacation. The bright lights of Las Vegas, the glitzy hotels, and the excitement of new experiences. My family and I arrived at one of the most luxurious resorts on the Strip, eager to unwind and leave behind the stresses of daily life. My name is Tyler, and at 19, I'd always felt responsible for looking after my family. My mom, Olivia, was the reason we were here. She had saved up for months to give us this trip. And then there was Emily, my younger sister, who at 14 was... The hotel lobby was stunning, decorated in gold and marble, the kind of place you only see in movies. But as we checked in, I couldn't shake this strange feeling, as though something was off. The air felt too thick, too heavy, like the city outside was pressing in on us. We got our keys and headed up to our room. The hallway was long, the lights dim, casting shadows that seemed to shift every time I glanced away. I dismissed the feeling, telling myself it was just nerves from the long trip. But as we entered our room, I saw it through the large window. I could see the lights of the city flickering, and yet something felt wrong. The hotel felt oddly quiet. That night, as we settled in, the unsettling feeling grew. Emily was already unpacking her things, her chatter a comfort in the silence. My mom was on the phone, and I took a moment to step outside onto the balcony for some fresh air. That's when I saw him across the courtyard, standing at the edge of the parking lot. A man, tall, wearing a dark coat despite the heat, just standing there, staring up at the hotel. His face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel his eyes on me. It wasn't the kind of Lou. I turned back quickly, my heart racing. I wasn't sure why, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I told myself it was just a trick of the light. But later, as the hours passed, I kept seeing glimpses of him watching from a distance, lurking in the corners of my vision. The tension was thick in the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone, that someone or something was watching us. And I knew then this trip was going to be anything but relaxing. Later that night, the room grew colder. Despite the warmth of the desert air outside, I felt the chills seep into my bones. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that we weren't truly alone in this hotel. I kept glancing at the door, the dark hallway beyond, my mind playing tricks on me. Emily, thankfully, was already asleep, but I couldn't relax. I kept thinking back to the man I'd seen outside. He hadn't moved from his spot all evening. And now, the strange, unsettling feeling I'd felt earlier was escalating, clawing at me from inside. I tried to ignore it, but my nerves wouldn't let me. I had to know. Quietly, I slipped out of the room, closing the door behind me as gently as possible. The hallway stretched out in front of me, empty and silent. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows along the walls. I crept toward the lobby, moving slowly, trying to avoid drawing attention. But as I passed the elevator, I froze. There, at the end of the hallway, I saw him, the man. He was standing in front of the stairwell, his head tilted slightly, as if listening for something. I couldn't breathe. His figure was tall and shadowed, his face still hidden in darkness. And then, for a split second, he turned and looked directly at me. His eyes gleamed, cold and hollow. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly backed away, heart racing. I darted back to the room, locking the door behind me. I looked at Emily, who was still peacefully asleep, oblivious. But I couldn't forget the look in that man's eyes. He was watching us, and I had no idea why. The rest of the night passed in an eerie silence. my mind racing with images of the man and his hollow, piercing gaze. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every creak of the building, every shadow that moved in the corner of my eye felt like it was closing in on me. When morning came, I forced myself to act normal. I didn't mention the man to my mom or Emily. I didn't want to worry them for no reason. But the unease remained, thick and heavy in the air. The whole family had planned to spend the day by the pool, but I could hardly focus on anything. Around noon, as we lounged in the hotel room, I heard it. A knock at the door. I froze, my blood running cold. I hadn't ordered room service, and we weren't expecting anyone. I walked cautiously to the door, trying to quiet the pounding in my chest. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but the hallway. No one was there. I opened the door slowly, scanning the hallway. Empty. But as I was about to close it, I noticed something on the floor, a small, crumpled piece of paper. I bowed to pick it up, my heart racing. The note was simple, written in neat, careful handwriting. I see you. I looked down the hallway, but there was still no sign of anyone. I slammed the door shut, my hand shaking as I locked it. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. Someone was playing a game, and we were the targets. My hands trembled as I stood there, staring at the crumpled note in my hand. I see you. The words burned in my mind, replaying over and over like a twisted chant. I tried to convince myself that it was just some sick joke, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The feeling of being watched had grown stronger, almost suffocating. I needed answers. I turned to Emily, who had been sitting on the bed, oblivious to my panic. Her eyes were wide with curiosity as I handed her the note. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I muttered, "but we need to get out of here." I rushed to the phone, ready to call the front desk. But before I could dial, I heard a soft knock on the door again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and dialed for security. No answer. The knock came again. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly walked to the door, trying not to make a sound. I peeked through the peephole, but all I could see was a dark hallway. No one was there. I backed away from the door, my breath shallow. Something wasn't right. I could feel the walls closing in on me, the weight of the hotel's silence pressing down on me like a vice. The world outside felt too far away. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the door. "I know you're in there." My blood ran cold. Thanks for watching. Did any of these stories make you feel uneasy? Have you ever had an encounter like this? Or perhaps experienced something even scarier? Let us know in the comments below. If you have a chilling story of your own, feel free to share it, and maybe we'll tell it in one of our future videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our terrifying tales. Until next time, stay safe and keep an eye over your shoulder.